Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and we do have a great show ahead of us today. I will be giving my predictions for UFC Fight Night, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Alexander Volkov. Should be an absolute banger of a main event with two hard-hitting heavyweights. But before I get too deep into this, I'm going to say this now. There is a ton of great grapplers in this fight card. It's unbelievable. I feel like when I was doing notes, I was putting great grappler under almost every single one of these fighters' descriptions. It's unbelievable. I'm very excited for this matchup. Plus, I am a fan of the Boston Celtics. If you do not follow basketball, the Boston Celtics just made the NBA Finals, so it has been a great weekend for me. I'm very excited, even though we had no UFC this last weekend, which is always a bummer. But nonetheless, let's deep dive right now into these predictions. First up, first fight of the night, Aaron Blanchfield versus J.J. Aldrich. The much more experienced J.J. Aldrich looks to try to get her fourth straight UFC win, while Aaron Blanchfield looks to stay on a roll since joining the UFC, getting her third straight win, looking to stay undefeated in the UFC at that. This is a big fight for really both of these ladies. I mean, honestly, both could have a great argument to be ranked with their third and fourth respective straight wins. So, I mean, like I said, this is a really big fight for both of them. Aaron Blanchfield is a far superior grappler and will 100% try to get this fight to the ground. J.J. Aldrich, on the other hand, is a tremendous striker, but she also does have tremendous takedown defense. I believe it's 72%, so that's great against the grappler. But at the same time, even though Aldrich has faced some of the best grapplers that this division has to offer and beaten some of them, I mean, she has faced the likes of Jillian Robertson and beat her. She has faced the likes of Polyana Viana and beat her. Two great grapplers in this division. I think Aaron Blanchfield is just too much. I think she's going to be too constant with the pressure of getting the takedown, and I think she will be able to get this fight to the ground. I'm taking Aaron Blanchfield by decision. Next up, we have Renat Faretinov versus Andreas Michailidis. While Renat is making his UFC debut, he is 20-2. He's riding in a 14-fight win streak under his belt. He seems to be just an absolute dominant wrestler, and he can beat you by decision. He could just smother you for 3 rounds. He can knock you out on the ground. He can submit you. He can do anything he wants on the ground. Well, Andreas, he is off to a rough start in the UFC. He's 1-2. Granted, his last fight, which was a loss, was against the highly talented prospect, the great kickboxer Alex Pereira, who's about to go fight a top 5 contender in this weight class and only his third UFC fight. So we're not going to hold that one too much against him, but nonetheless, still off to a fairly rough start. He also is a fairly good grappler, but I don't see him being on the same level as Renat. I am going Renat by second round submission. Next up, we have Jeffrey Molina versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. The tale of two really UFC careers. Jeffrey Molina has come in and absolutely looked fantastic in his first 2 UFC fights, where Zhalgas has gone 1-3 in his UFC career. So he's definitely looking to turn it around. Molina is looking to stay the track, keep going in the direction that he is. He is the more well-rounded fighter. I think that's going to be the big difference in this fight. I am going Jeffrey Molina by second round TKO. That leads into Johnny Munoz versus Tony Gravely. 2 guys that are absolutely tremendous grapplers. Munoz is more of the jiu-jitsu, while Gravely is more of a wrestler and will smother you, use the ground and pound to try to edge out a win. I think it's going to be tough for Gravely to get much going, though, on the ground. Like I said, Munoz is a great jiu-jitsu fighter. I think every time he kind of posts up and tries to start raining down punches, Munoz is going to be able to grab a limb, get a submission going. I think it's going to play a big factor in this fight. I'm going Munoz, and I have him finishing this fight by third round submission. Next up is Nicholas Stolze versus Benoit St. Denis. Another bout of two great grapplers. Like I said, this is going to be a lot of grapplers in this fight card, but both are looking for their first UFC win. This is going to be a really, really close fight. St. Denis is coming off of his first ever professional MMA loss. I look to him to bounce back in this fight. I think he's going to get the better positions. I think he's going to win on the judges' scorecards by decision. And then we have Ode Osborne versus Zaruk Adashev. Osborne is a very good, well-rounded fighter. He has a lot more experience with the tendency to go on the ground a little bit more. Where Adashev is more of the stand-up guy. Adashev is very inexperienced, though. He only does have 7 professional MMA fights. Not even just UFC. I'm talking about overall 7 UFC bouts, or 7 MMA bouts, 1 and 2 in the UFC. I think the experience, I think the well-roundedness will be a huge advantage. For Osborne, I have him winning this fight by second round submission. Next up, we have Daniel Argueta versus Damon Jackson. The undefeated ground specialist Argueta goes up against the much more experienced and also a grappler, Damon Jackson. Argueta actually took this fight on short notice. This is his UFC debut. He's an LFA veteran. He's been fighting in the LFA for, I believe, 2 or 3 fights. Jackson is coming off 2 straight wins and wins in 4 of his last 5 fights. So he is on a roll as of recently. And I think the experience is going to play a big factor in this fight. I'm going with Jackson by second round submission. I'm not too entirely confident in that just because we haven't seen much from Argueta, but I'm going with the experience in this matchup. I'm going Damon Jackson by second round submission. And then last up, we have the premier prelim of the night, Joe Solecki versus Alex De Silva. Even though De Silva does have 10 more professional MMA fights, this is his UFC debut. Solecki is much more comfortable on the ground and in the octagon. He has tremendous jiu-jitsu. De Silva is pretty comfortable wherever. I really don't see him having an edge anywhere, but he does have tremendous takedown defense. He's a good striker. He's a good jiu-jitsu fighter. While he may not have the UFC experience, I look to his MMA experience to be a big factor in this fight and the well-roundedness of De Silva with the takedown defense that he has. I'm going De Silva by decision in this bout. Next up, we have the first main card bout of the night, Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Felice Herrig. This is a very interesting fight. Neither lady has won a fight since 2018. They're both coming off huge losing streaks. Karolina has the last win between the two of them, and it actually came against Felice Herrig back in 2018. Felice is much more comfortable on the ground, where Karolina is more comfortable on the feet, but both can definitely hold their own in the opposite's strength. So I do see this being a very, very close fight, but Karolina has been more active as of recent. Felice Herrig hasn't fought since 2020 in August, I believe, so she's on almost a 2-year layoff from professional MMA. I'm going with Karolina, but I'm not too confident in this one. Like I said, both ladies are not doing too hot. I can't remember which one is which, but one's coming off of like 3 straight losses. The other one's coming off of 5 straight losses. It's just not looking good for either of them in their UFC career, but I am going to go slightly Carolina by decision. And then next up, we have Alonzo Menifield versus Askar Mazharov. I'm absolutely pumped for this fight. This is actually the first of 3 straight fights where someone will be making their UFC debut. In this one, Askar Mazharov will be making his UFC debut. Both are fairly well-rounded. While Mazharov is making his UFC debut, kind of like the Alex Da Silva fight, he has a lot of professional MMA experience. I believe he has over 30 professional MMA fights. So he's been around the block or two, but this will be his first fight in the UFC. Menifield, as of late, has not had the greatest success. He has lost 3 of his last 5 bouts, but he does have the UFC experience on his side. And also, he has faced the likes of Paul Craig, who he actually beat. He's faced Ovin St. Preux. He's faced Devin Clark. He has William Knight. He has faced great UFC fighters. I really like this matchup, but Mazharov just seems like a freak of nature. He should have had his UFC debut a little bit ago. He's had at least 2 UFC debut fights canceled on him, one against Ben Rothwell, and the other one I'm blanking on off the top of my head. But nonetheless, this is going to be an absolute banger of a fight. I'm going Mazharov by 2nd round TKO in this matchup. And then we have the last women's fight of the night, Karine Silva versus Poliana Botelho. Silva making her UFC debut after getting a great win on the UFC Dana White Contender Series last year, versus Botelho, who will be making her 7th appearance in the UFC, trying to snap her 2-fight losing streak. Botelho has tremendous kickboxing, and I'm fairly excited to see her back in the octagon, while Silva just seems like an absolute master at jiu-jitsu in her young MMA career. I really like what I've seen from Karine Silva, and I think Botelho is really fighting with her back against the wall, and I think that might be in her head a little bit more than it really should be. I'm going Silva, and I'm going quick. I'm going 1st round submission for Karine Silva in her UFC debut. And then Michael Trizano versus Lucas Almeida. Trizano is the season 27 Ultimate Fighter champion at the lightweight division. And a UFC veteran comes in against the 13-1 Lucas Almeida, who is just absolutely well-rounded in his UFC debut. Almeida did compete in the Contender Series. He did lose, but then he was able to bounce back, get a win in a different promotion that impressed Dana White, all the UFC higher-ups, enough to give him a chance at the UFC. While Almeida does have great jiu-jitsu, I like the experience. I like the takedown defense of Michael Trizano. He has over 70% takedown defense. I'm going with him in this matchup by decision. Next up, we have the co-main event of the evening, Dan 50K Ige versus Movsar Evloev. Huge matchup for both of these guys in the featherweight division. Dan Ige was once a top contender in this division, but has just gone through the ringer as of late with so many tough opponents in the last 2 years. We're talking about Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie, Edson Barboza. The list goes on. This guy has faced the top contenders in this weight class, and he's even beaten some of them. Out of the people I just listed, he's only beaten Edson Barboza, but you look at Josh Emmett, Korean Zombie, Calvin Kattar. That's the number 4, 5, and 6 featherweight contenders in the world. Korean Zombie just fought for the title. Josh Emmett and Calvin Kattar are about to fight in a couple weeks. So, I mean, yeah, he's on a bit of a losing streak, but it's against some of the top guys in this division. While Evelev will be coming in, and this is by far his toughest opponent. If you look at his past 5 UFC opponents, it's a lot of guys that a lot of people have never really heard of. So Dan Ige is by far the biggest name that he will face. Both guys are pretty well-rounded, but both will definitely be trying to get this fight to the ground, I see, especially Movzar. Neither guy is incredibly aggressive. From what I can see, there's a lot of decisions in their record books. So I do see it also going to decision in this matchup. But I think Ige, this is no offense to Evelev. I think he's phenomenal. But I think the talent gap from what he's faced to now facing Dan Ige is just a humongous gap. I think Dan Ige pulls this fight out by decision. And that brings us to the main event of the evening. Heavyweights going at it. Alexander Volkov versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. 2 heavyweights that have, literally faced the best of the best this division has had to offer in their entire UFC careers. We're talking about Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, Curtis Blades, you name it, these guys, Derek Lewis. These guys have literally faced the best people in this division. They're both coming off losses, but Alexander Volkov's loss was to Tom Aspinall, who is now the number 6 contender, fighting the guy at number 4, who Jairzinho Rozenstruik lost to in his last fight, Curtis Blades. So again, we're talking about 2 phenomenal fighters that just face the best guys this division really has to offer. I said this in the beginning, these are 33 combined KOs between these two in their MMA careers. 33 combined knockouts. I do not see this fight going to the ground one bit, and this may be the only fight that we don't see a takedown attempted at all in this fight. But it really seems like both of these guys have been playing sort of the gatekeeper between, like, if you can beat us, you're a contender. If you cannot, you are not a contender. And I think it's going to be an exciting fight. I think it's almost like the battle to see who can stay as the gatekeeper of the heavyweight division. But I am going with the far, far more experienced Alexander Volkov. This guy has over 40 professional fights compared to Rozenstruik's 15. So it's a little lopsided in experience. That's why I'm going to go Volkov, and I'm going with him by 3rd round TKO. And that is all I have for you this week. Thank you all so much for listening. Next week we're back to our normal schedule. We're going to have more of a extended out show, normal time show. We have my reaction to this UFC fight night that I just made my predictions for. Next, in 2 weeks, we got UFC 275 that I'm so pumped about. I'm going to be giving my predictions for that. We got Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka for the light heavyweight title. We have Valentina Shevchenko versus the young up-and-comer Talia Santos for the women's flyweight title. We also have a rematch of arguably, if not, it might not even be an argument, the greatest women's fight in UFC history. Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Yang Wei Li. There's tons of great bouts on that card. I'm so excited to talk about it next week. But for now, you can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. I please encourage you to DM me if you want to hear any sort of my opinions when it comes to MMA. I would love to interact with you guys more. Whether it's just a short, one-worded answer that I can give you straight off the bat in your Twitter DMs or Twitter or Instagram DMs. Or if it's long enough, I might even incorporate it into my show, which I would love to do for you guys. I think it would be an awesome experience to be able to shout you guys out, put you guys in the show. I'll even put your Twitter handle or Instagram in the show if you so choose that you want that. I would love to interact with you guys a little bit more. If you want to hear my general sports opinions, you can find me on SquaboSays YouTube channel Tuesdays at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. Me and him are going to go at it a little bit tomorrow. He's a Lakers fan. I am a Celtics fan. The Lakers missed the playoffs. The Celtics are in the finals. He thinks he's going to tear my Celtics apart. I don't think it's going to be that easy when we are one half of the NBA Finals. So stay tuned for that. Please tune in to The Bolt on SquaboSays YouTube channel, 3:30 Pacific Standard Time on Tuesdays. Going to be a very exciting show tomorrow. But nonetheless, thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. Please tune in next week. Please like, subscribe, follow me on all social media. Again, Instagram, Monday Night Fight Talk, just like my YouTube. Twitter is at MN Fight Talk. All those links will be in the description under a link tree. I will also put SquaboSays YouTube channel in the description. Thank you all so much for listening. I will see you all next week, Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Until then, have a great week, everyone. See you then.